Oliver Twist, 2.
"Were there many people at the execution this morning?" Fagin asked. It was obvious from the boys' answers that they had been there. Oliver couldn't understand how they had time to do so much work. Afterward, Fagin, Charlie, and the Dodger played a game. Fagin put a watch and other trinkets in his pockets, and then the boys sneaked up on him and tried to take the things from his pockets without him knowing. Fagin cried out every time he felt a hand in his pocket, and then the game would start all over again. After the game had been played many times, the Dodger and Charlie went out onto the streets of the city. "Have they finished work now?" Oliver asked Fagin. "Yes, indeed they have," said Fagin. "Of course, they may come across a little work on the way. Let them be your teachers. Do everything they say." Fagin spoke highly of the Dodger. "Make him your model," he said. "Now, let's see if you can pull this handkerchief from my pocket without me knowing." Fagin was delighted when Oliver took the handkerchief from his pocket without him seeing or feeling anything. "You will grow up to be a great man," said Fagin. Oliver could not understand how succeeding at the handkerchief trick would help him become a great man. For some days, Fagin encouraged Oliver to play the same game. Finally, he was given permission to leave the house with Charlie and the Dodger. Oliver thought that he was being taken to work in a factory. He was shocked when he saw the Dodger pick the pocket of an elderly man. The Dodger gave the stolen handkerchief to Charlie, and the two boys ran off. Oliver panicked and started to run too. The old man, a Mr. Brownlow, saw Oliver and chased after him. "Stop, thief!" he cried out. Oliver ran and ran. More people joined the chase after him. Even the Dodger and Charlie chased after him. "Stop, thief!" people shouted after Oliver. Shortly afterward, the Dodger and Charlie ran down a side street and disappeared. Oliver ran on, but eventually he collapsed in the mud. The angry crowd stared at Oliver. A policeman grabbed hold of him. Oliver was dragged away to the police station where he was searched. Mr. Brownlow watched. Nothing was found on Oliver, but he was locked up in a cell. Mr. Brownlow felt terrible. "Can he be innocent?" he asked himself. "There is something in that boy's face, something that touches me. It is a look that I have seen before." But Mr. Brownlow could not remember where he had seen such a face. Oliver was taken to court. Mr. Brownlow was worried about Oliver's health. A man came to the court to explain that Oliver was not the pickpocket. Oliver was set free. He was so sick that he collapsed in the yard. Mr. Brownlow took Oliver home with him. Mrs. Bedwin, the housekeeper, took care of Oliver. After some days, Oliver could sit in a chair in the little housekeeper's room to eat. Oliver could not take his eyes off a painting of a beautiful young woman on the wall. "I feel like she is trying to talk to me," he said. Mr. Brownlow came to see Oliver. He was happy to see that Oliver was getting better. It was then that Mr. Brownlow realized who Oliver reminded him of. Oliver looked very much like the woman in the painting. Meanwhile, Fagin was angry to learn that Oliver had been taken by the police. "If Oliver tells on us, it would hurt us all," Fagin told his friend Bill Sikes. "You must get hold of him before he says anything," said Sikes. Fagin, Sikes, Charlie, and the Dodger didn't want to go near a police station. They sent one of their friends, Nancy, instead. She had met Oliver at Fagin's house. Nancy decided to pretend to be Oliver's sister. She learned that Mr. Brownlow had taken Oliver away. After a time, Oliver recovered from his sickness. New clothes were bought for Oliver to wear, and so he gave his old ones to a servant to sell. Oliver felt like he was in heaven. Everyone was so kind to him. One night, Mr. Brownlow invited Oliver to his office. He wanted to hear Oliver's life story.